What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. Today I wanted to take some time to talk about some of the things that other influencers within the kayak fishing community don't really speak about, but I honestly think that they should. A lot of the things that I wanted to talk about today are things that I wish I would have known before getting into kayak fishing. And I'm not trying to make this video to dissuade anybody from getting into the sport. I just want to bring awareness to a few things that I never thought of when I got into this sport, but I really wish I would have beforehand. So let's get into it. And before we get into the video, I would just like to take a moment to talk about something. I know I'm wearing a face cover. I have reasoning for doing so. I've got pretty bad teeth, honestly, and I'm still not 100% comfortable showing my face on camera while talking because of that fact. It is something that I'm pretty self-conscious about, but I will work on getting better at it, and hopefully at some point I have the money to get my issues fixed so I don't have to wear a face covering anymore. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to talk about, so let's get into the main topic of today's video. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about today is when getting into kayak fishing, I never thought that I would pay attention to the weather as much as I do. Now, I've been fishing most of my life since I can remember. I have gone out fishing fairly routinely with my parents, with friends, other family members, and so forth. No matter what I was fishing out of or where I was fishing, whether it was from the bank, from a boat, with a friend or a family member, or anything like that, I never paid attention to the weather as much as I do now as a kayak fisherman, and here's why. If you're out there on a boat and it's windy, the wind doesn't really affect a boat nearly as much as it does a kayak. When you're in a boat, it takes a lot more wind to push you around and push you out of your spot than it does when you're in a kayak. A lot of boats have canopies or covers over them, so if it rains, you can get somewhere dry for a little bit until the storm passes. You have windshields to block the wind. You have a covered space to get under from, the elements, like if it's really hot outside. And you have the ability, if it does get bad out with the weather gets bad, you have the ability to start up your motor or your trolling motor if you don't have a main motor, and you have the ability to get to the boat launch fairly quick. Now, if you're in a kayak, any little bit of wind is going to blow you around and blow you out of your spot, and paddling in the wind, or if you've got a pedal drive system, something like that, pedaling against the wind or paddling against the wind is a nightmare. If you're out there and it's going to rain or you get caught in the middle of a rainstorm, you're not going to be able to get back to the launch as quick. You're going to have to search for somewhere dry, head for shore if the wind gets really bad. You're not going to be able to get somewhere safe as quickly as you would be in a boat. So that has made me pay attention to what the weather is going to be like beforehand a lot more than I ever did when I was either fishing from the bank or fishing from a boat. The second thing that I wanted to talk about in this video is space management. Now, when you're fishing out of a boat, or heck, even when you're fishing from land, you have the ability to, a lot of the times, bring more tackle with you, especially if you're in a boat. Some tackle bags that you can carry on your back are about as big as a kayak crate, can hold about the same amount of boxes, but you are limited to the amount of space that you have within your kayak. To, a kayak crate, if your kayak allows for one, if you've sprung for one of the fishing kayaks. A lot of them can hold a kayak crate, but if you're fishing with, just your standard kayak that you can buy from most sporting goods stores, you don't have the room for a kayak crate. Typically, you don't even have more than 1 or 2 rod holders. So you really have to pay attention and be conscious about what gear you're bringing, what rods you're bringing, and what tackle you're going to be fishing with that particular day. Because you don't really have the space to bring a whole lot of stuff with you. So if you're going out for a full day of fishing and quickly realize that what you have brought with you isn't catching fish, you've got a limited number of resources to use to put something together, to find a pattern, to get fish to bite. So you really have to pay attention to what you bring with you. And a lot of the times, if you're going out all day, you're going to want to bring like a cooler, some stuff to drink, some stuff to eat, things like that. Again, when you're in a kayak, unless you've got one of those 12, 13 foot long fishing kayaks, a lot of the times you don't have room for a cooler either. So that's another thing that you really have to pay attention to, is what gear are you going to bring out with you to give yourself the best chances of putting something together and having a successful day out on the water. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that fishing slower isn't optional in a kayak. It is almost forced upon you. And what I mean by that is, when you're in a boat, you have the ability to cover a lot of water a lot more quickly than you do in a kayak. You have the ability to power fish very quickly, move constantly, keep going, keep fishing, cover water until you find fish. Now, when you're in a kayak, you are a lot slower. You really have to pick an area apart that you want to fish a lot more, because you don't have the ability to move from spot to spot as quickly as you would in a boat. It forces you to fish a lot more slowly, a lot more methodically, and with a lot more intent, rather than just chuck and wind a bait until something manages to come across it. You really have to pick these areas apart and fish them thoroughly, because you are limited to travel speed, or limited by your travel speed, and cannot access as many areas of your body of water as quickly as you can in a boat. So you really have to, like I said, just pick that cover apart, pick that dock apart, pick that small bay apart, or that main lake point, and really make sure that you fished it efficiently and covered the entire area as best as you can before you decide to move on. Now, before we move on to the next thing that I would like to talk about, I would like to ask you guys if you are enjoying what you're seeing watching this video, or if you are into fishing content, kayak fishing content, anything like that, if you would please hop down and hit the subscribe button. Typically, I will ask viewers at the end of the video to subscribe, and I don't know if that is more or less efficient than asking in the middle of the video, so I'm going to ask right now. If you guys are liking the content, and if you would like to see more and would consider subscribing, I would really appreciate that. Anyway, let's get into the next point. Alright, on to the next one. So, for the next thing that I would like to talk about is, I decided to get into kayak fishing as a cheaper alternative to buying myself like a small John boat or a cheap bass boat or something like that. And what I've quickly realized is rigging out a fishing kayak is a constant money pit. You start off simple and you tell yourself that that's why you're getting into kayak fishing, is for simplicity and, budget friendly options to get yourself off the shore. But it quickly turns into more than that for a lot of people, myself included. Like I said, that's why I got into kayak fishing, was because I saw it as a budget option to buying a boat. And now I am to a point where I have spent probably as much on my kayak as I could have on a small boat that would get me around the lake quicker and give me more room for storage and room to move around and things like that. You start adding all of these things like, rod holders, electronics, pedal drive system, batteries, lighting, trolling motor. All of these things add up very rapidly. And then soon enough, you spent 3, 4, 5 grand on your kayak, which is enough to get you a cheap boat, or at the very least, get you a down payment on a nicer boat. And that is something that I didn't think of when I got into this sport, but have been more conscious about as of lately. But regardless of that fact, I love kayak fishing. If I had the choice to go back in time to when I decided to get into this sport, knowing what I know now about it, I would absolutely still get into it. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not making this video to dissuade anybody from getting into this sport. I'm just trying to bring some of these things that people don't talk about to light. That way you know about them ahead of time before you make any final decisions. Alright, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is comfort becoming a problem after spending a lot of time on the water. A lot of kayak seats are pretty uncomfortable, and while you may be fine for the first few hours of the day, if you're somebody who goes out fishing with the intent of spending the whole day on the water, you are going to want to make yourself as comfortable as possible. You will be sitting down, unless you have good balance enough to stand up and stretch, you will be sitting down for hours and hours at a time. You need to make sure that you have a comfortable seat to sit in, a good back support, and that you're not going to get uncomfortable a couple hours in and want to head back to the launch. If this is something that you want to spend the whole day doing, you're going to want to be comfortable doing it. It's not something that you take lightly, I promise you. The kayak that I got has pretty uncomfortable seating, and it did not take me long at all to put seat cushions and things like that into my seat to make it more comfortable, because after a day on the water, I was pretty miserable by the time it was done. So spending a whole day on the water, you are going to get uncomfortable. If you decide that that's something you want to do, you're going to want to do something about it. The next thing is landing fish in a kayak while by yourself is a lot more difficult than when you're in a boat with somebody else, or even in a boat by yourself. Like I said, you're sitting in a confined space in a chair and don't have the ability to get up, stand up, move around, or anything like that. So when you hook into a fish and you get it up to the boat, you've got to be able to hold your rod in one hand while operating a net with the other hand and not lose your fish in that process. I have lost quite a few fish to fumbling around trying to get my rod up close to my boat, get the fish right up there, and then swoop under it with the net and get it. I have lost fish. It is awkward at first, but something that after a while you will get used to. But like I said, it will be very awkward at first. And you also need to pay attention to what you're doing with your hooks. Typically, you've got treble hooks, small hooks in confined places, and they will get caught in your clothes, they will get caught in your net, they will get caught in other fishing line if you have multiple rods. A lot of the times, if you have like a kayak crate, it sits up close to where you're sitting, like right behind your seat. And if you're moving around and you reach behind your seat like this, I've got treble hooks caught in the back of my sweatshirt before and have had to cut them out with a knife because the barbs latched themselves into the fabric of my sweatshirt and would not let go. So I now am constantly paying attention to where my hooks are at on my rods that are behind me in my kayak crate on the rod holders, and I'm constantly paying attention to what I'm doing with my bait that is on the rod that I'm using while it's not in the water. And what I try to do is when I'm not actively casting and fishing a bait with the rod that I have in my hand, say I'm working with a fish that I've just pulled out of the net or doing something that is making me not actively fish, I will just toss my lure in the water and just let it sit there with my bail closed in the water with my rod, on the side of my kayak and the little rod space that it's got. That way I know that that lure is not in the boat. It's off the side. It's not going to get caught in anything. It's not going to hook me or anything like that. So I know in my head that that is out of the way and is not a problem. And then all you need to do is make sure that the rods that you have behind you on your kayak crate or in your rod holders, just make sure that the hooks on the lures that are tied to those rods are not going to get caught in the back of your sweatshirt, and you should be good to go. Now the next thing is something that kind of ties into the last thing that I was talking about, and that is that you are going to spend a lot of time organizing and changing things out in your kayak. Because of the fact that you're in a small space, you are going to spend a lot of time adjusting your gear. You're going to spend a lot of time untangling your rods and your lures from each other. And you're going to spend a lot of time repositioning things and getting things where you want them and where you're the most comfortable reaching for them. My first few trips out on the water in my fishing kayak after I got it, I spent more time messing with my gear, changing things around, changing how my fish finder screen is located, how it's pointing at me, the angle of it, all sorts of different things that was taking me away from what I went out there to do originally, and that was just try to catch a fish. So you want to make sure that when you're setting up your kayak, that you set everything up in a way that seems most efficient for you and how you want it. That way you spend less time out on the water doing those things. All right, just a couple more points that I wanted to make here. The next one is that, access to different areas with a kayak is great. You have the ability to launch your boat and fish lakes in areas that you would never be able to back up an actual boat trailer. But it's not always that easy. Some boat launches really suck for kayaks. That's a fact. I have a few around here that I absolutely refuse to use because they're terrible for kayaks. Carrying and dragging a kayak it can be brutal sometimes, especially if you decide to get one of the heavier fishing kayaks. When I started kayak fishing, I had one of the cheap Walmart kayaks, like $300-400. It was great, and I could pick that thing up by myself, pack it down to the water, set it down, and not have any problems. But when I decided to upgrade to the fishing kayak that I have now, all of that changed. I have to drag my kayak around on a trailer. I have to back my trailer up to the water, pull the kayak off as close to the water as possible. My trailer can't be submerged, so I have to pull the kayak off the trailer close to the water and then hand launch it. And then the same in reverse, obviously, when I decide to pull out, I have to drag my kayak out of the water. I have to lift the nose of it up and then push it up onto the trailer because, again, my trailer can't be submerged. So that kind of limits me as far as using some launches go, because I can't really back my trailer up into the water. And I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about is that you are going to have frustrating days. You will have frustrating days out on the water. There is no doubt about it. And it's usually a combination of things working against you, whether it's the wind and the current, the wind and a bad bite, bad weather, bad bite. There's always going to be something working against you. But when there isn't, kayak fishing is one of the most fun ways to go out and catch fish that I have ever experienced in my life. I've fished from boats, I've fished from the bank, I've fished in the ocean, I've fished in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways, and I still have more fun out on my little plastic kayak than I have in any other form of fishing that I've done before. So even when it feels like everything is working against you, you go out there and it's super windy and the fish aren't biting. You go out there and you get caught in a rainstorm, you get caught in a windstorm. You go out there and even if there might not be any wind, it might be 1,000,000 degrees outside and you're just stuck roasting in the sun with no breeze to cool you down or anything. There will be days like that. And you just got to power through those days, man, because kayak fishing is one of the most fun things I've ever done, and something that if you are considering getting into, I would highly recommend it. I would love to see this sport continue to grow. I would love to see more people get active within the kayak fishing community. So if kayak fishing is something that you have ever considered, I say do it. You will honestly have a blast. It will be some of the most fun that you've ever had and the most fun that you can have in a little tiny plastic boat. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for today. These were just some of the things that I noticed not a lot of other influencers within this community really talk about, but I feel like they should, because none of the things that I mentioned in this video were things that I thought about before getting into kayak fishing. And now that I've been doing this for a couple of years, I wanted to share those things with you guys just to bring awareness and to give you some more things to think about if you're on the fence of getting into this sport. Anyway, that's going to do it. Thank you guys for watching. If you've taken the time and gotten all the way through this video, I really appreciate you. It really means a lot to me. If this video is something that you liked, or if you would like to see more kayak fishing content, more tutorial content centered around fishing, how-tos, things like that, hit the like button and please hit the subscribe button down below. It really means a lot to me. I'm trying to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year. That's my goal. I'm at, I think, 45 right now. So let's try to get to 100 by the end of the year. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.